Today we're going to talk about the book Anatomy of the State by Murray Newton Rothbard. I figured I'll start a series about libertarian books and authors and quotes because I'm a libertarian mom. And what is that? I just believe that you know what's best for you and your family, and governments should stay out of your way. You should subscribe to my channel. So let's get to it. You can find Anatomy of the State and countless other titles about freedom online for free on the Mises Institute website, linked below. Who is Murray Rothbard? He was an economist, considered the founder of anarcho-capitalism. To Rothbard, government is the most absurd idea.
I think that all government is a waste of taxpayer money.
While most people and organizations make a living by the voluntary exchange of goods and services that we produce, men are born naked, like Rothbard says, and the rest is drag.
You know, you're born
He
naked
doesn't
and
say
the
that.
rest is drag.
And we learned how to use the natural resources for survival and later on for trade, which he calls the origin of the free markets and property rights. Note that these precede governments. Like he says, production precedes predation. The state, on the other hand, doesn't produce. It just steals. That's because governments maintain the monopoly of the use of force in a given territory. In Anatomy of the State, Rothbard references German philosopher Franz Oppenheimer, not to confuse with the physicist Oppenheimer, who wrote that there are two mutually exclusive ways of acquiring wealth. The economic means way, by which men learn to use property rights and free market instead of just fighting over scarce resources. We make voluntary exchanges peacefully and harmoniously. And then there is the political means, using force and violence to seize other people's goods and services. Good old theft, if you will.
But here I come, the government. And I get to take 40% of your lunch.
So to Rothbard, the state is the organization of the political means, as it provides a legal, orderly, systematic channel for the predation of private property. This happened over centuries, millennia even, as a conquering tribe would loot and murder a conquered tribe. And, over time, they realized that it was much more advantageous to let the conquered live and produce, while the conquering tribe establishes itself as the ruler and secures an income through taxation. That's how states were born. There was no social contract. And for that to happen, for the nobility to maintain itself, they need a surplus in production, meaning there needs to be more people producing than members of the state. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive, right? The full-time bureaucracy, president, prime minister, king, queen, congressmen and women, judges, civil employees need to be a minority. Therefore, in order to remain in power, any government needs either the active support, the active, enthusiastic support, or at the very least, the passive resignation of the majority, the ones who are actually producing. For this essential acceptance, the majority must be persuaded by ideology and propaganda that their government is good, wise, and at least inevitable, and certainly better than other conceivable alternatives. Promoting this ideology among the people is the vital social task of intellectuals and artists, I would add, quote unquote, for the masses of men do not create their own ideas. They follow passively the ideas adopted and disseminated by the body of intellectuals. So with democracy, the idea of identifying oneself with one's government became even more of a thing. Collectivism. It's not you. It's not your family. It's us. We are the government. There is no point of rising up against the injustices committed by the state because there is no state. It's us. It's society. So if they decided to start a war, it's not their war. It's your war now. It's ours. Notice how quick anybody who doesn't resonate with what the norm is, what the conventional way of thinking and living is labeled a conspiracy theorist. Because God forbid people start thinking for themselves. Also, notice how common sense is treated like a menace these days. Another method that intellectuals, artists, and, government puppets use to convince you that the government is good and inevitable is inducing guilt. You have too much. You're greedy. Inflation is not the result of my irresponsible spending. It's the result of greedy entrepreneurs rising prices. Listen to this wonderful piece of Anatomy of the State. The increasing use of scientific jargon has permitted the state's intellectuals to weave obscurantist apologia for state rule that would have only met with derision by the populace of a simpler age. Meaning, they use beautiful fancy words to justify things that are unjustifiable and would otherwise be rejected if presented for what they really are. Then he continues, a robber who justified his theft by saying that he really helped his victims, by his spending giving a boost to the retail trade, would find few converts. But when this theory is clothed in Keynesian equations and impressive references to the multiplier effect, it unfortunately carries more conviction. And so the assault on common sense proceeds, each age performing the task in its own way. Bottom line, there is state power and social power. The latter means creative productivity, peaceful exchange, and cooperation. The former means power over men. State power is parasitic and coercive. Rothbard argues that the whole history of mankind is men producing from nature and other men, statesmen, preying upon the producers. And then the producers trying to impose limits to the power of the state, but never really succeeding. In the last few centuries, the limits tried have been constitutional ones, but they have also failed because the Constitution was designed with checks and balances to limit any one governmental power. And yet, they had developed a Supreme Court with the monopoly of the ultimate interpreting power. We all are told to believe the federal judiciary system and that it is independent, but it really is part of the government apparatus, and they are appointed by the executive and legislative branches. This means that the government has set itself up as a judge in its own cause.
My idea of a perfect government is one guy who sits in a small room at a desk, and the only thing he's allowed to decide is who to nuke. The man is chosen based on some kind of IQ test and maybe also a physical tournament, like a decathlon.
And that is why Rothbard thought that independent intellectual criticism is the greatest threat to the state. When you don't passively believe or agree when you don't passively believe or accept everything that they tell you to believe and accept. Who's they? Anthony Fauci. Okay, Fauci. Who's they? Oh, the BBC, the CBC, Fauci, Taylor Swift, or basically anyone. Because you are entitled to your own unique opinion and decisions that are tailored to you and your family and your own unique life circumstances and experience and whatever information you have access to. and never have access to information been more readily available to anyone in the history of mankind. That's why a lot of people want the government to regulate social media. The exact same people who gain lots of money, power, and influence, or simply don't lose lots of money, power, and influence by going against the status quo, are the people who want to be able to control what you think and what you say. And of course, they're going to tell you that it's all about protecting you from hate speech, protecting democracy. Because saying that they want to control you would make it really hard for you to get on board, wouldn't it? This is it. This is Anatomy of the State. Again, through the link below, you can read the whole thing. You can read the whole PDF in one sitting. It's only 62 pages, short and sweet. A must read if you find yourself lost between all this talk of left and right that is really just meant to divide us. When really what we should be talking about is, why did we allow governments to control our lives so much? Smash like, subscribe. Again, I'm a libertarian mom and I'm also a Brazilian. And Brazil is all of this on steroids. So really, if you're Brazilian, you're way more likely to be a libertarian or an anarchist, really, or an anarcho-capitalist. Because really, the state can be nasty. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Yeah, I will see you on the next one. Bye.
Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Don't teach a man to fish and you feed yourself. He's a grown man. Fishing's not that hard.